Machiavelli doesn't whisper, he pierces you. He doesn't speak to comfort, he speaks to wake up sleeping predators within his conscience. If there is one thing he saw before anyone else, it is this: most people are not trapped by external enemies, but by the fantasy that saving others is an absolute virtue. This fantasy destroyed kings, dissolved invisible empires, and daily transforms lucid individuals into voluntary martyrs in wars that do not belong to them. You don't get hurt out of love. You get hurt by a tainted idea of kindness. Every time you reach out to someone who doesn't want to rise up, you tear a piece of their own psychic structure and call it humanity. Machiavelli, observing the corridors of power, realized early on that undiscriminating compassion is just the most elegant form of psychological suicide. The predator does not bite the victim hard. It feeds on those who feel responsible for carrying the weak on their shoulders. And then the question arises that almost no one has the courage to ask: who taught you that saying no is cruel? Who planted in you the notion that enduring other people's pain makes you more valuable as a human being? Machiavelli saw this as social programming, an invisible engineering that transforms lucid people into energy reserves for chaotic minds. You believe it is love, but what you practice is loyalty to your own annulment. Notice the pattern. The more you sacrifice, the less you are respected. The more you give in, the more demanding you become. Not because the world is unfair, but because the human psyche operates in silent hierarchies. Whoever places himself as a resource starts to be treated as an object. Whoever accepts being drained teaches others that their energy is a right, not a gift. Machiavelli did not romanticize this. He just watched, cold, precise, without illusions. There is a truth that burns when touched. There are people who do not want salvation. They want an audience. They want human anchors so they don't sink alone. They are experts in converting empathy into dependence, closeness into control, care into obligation. You offer your hand, hoping to see someone climb up, but you feel the sudden pull that takes you to the bottom. And even as you drown, you still think, maybe if I love a little more. Why do you insist? Because your identity was built on usefulness. You were not taught to exist, but to serve. Being a lighthouse even when there are no boats, keeping the flame burning while consuming the wax itself. Machiavelli would call this a strategy of slow extinction. An individual who distributes everything does not build power, he builds dependence. Note the hidden mechanics. Time, focus, vitality, money, emotional clarity are all finite resources. When you invest these assets in someone who does not evolve, you are not losing by chance, you are financing an internal bankruptcy. And the perverse thing is that the more you empty yourself, the more you believe you are doing the right thing. Blind altruism masquerades as virtue while devouring the very foundation. Machiavelli understood that psychic survival requires a form of therapeutic darkness. Not vulgar cruelty, but the ability to allow others to face the impact of their own choices. Each premature rescue interrupts the lesson that reality was preparing. Every excessive protection cancels out the possibility of genuine transformation. Those who save too much prevent maturation. Those who support too much infantilize. And then the internal fracture appears. You feel guilty at the thought of walking away. An inner voice murmurs that this will make you cold, selfish, inhuman. But this voice is not conscience. It's conditioning. It is a reflection of a society that needs exhausted saviors to sustain bankrupt structures. Machiavelli would not ask you to be loved. He would ask you to be lucid. Because lucidity is the true shield against invisible games. As long as you believe that all suffering deserves rescue, you will continue to be recruited into other people's wars, bleeding for battles you never chose to fight. Are you ready to hear something even more uncomfortable? Many times you don't try to save others out of generosity, but out of fear. Fear of appearing cruel. Fear of losing ties. Fear of discovering who you are when you stop being needed. But Machiavelli, motionless in the shadows of history, observes in silence and lets a sentence hang in the air: there is no power where there is no choice. And there is no choice where everything is an obligation. What you call love may just be attachment disguised as virtue. What you call kindness may just be an inability to set limits. And what you call humanity may actually be the invisible code that keeps you trapped by those unwilling to rise up. In the next part, Machiavelli will take you inside the gear that turns saviors into ruins and reveal the first human archetype that contaminates everything it touches. Get ready, because after this, you won't see people the same way again. Machiavelli now no longer observes from afar. He leans into your ear like someone who knows your innermost thoughts and points to scenes you've already lived through but chose not to interpret. You're at home, finally in silence after an exhausted day, when your phone vibrates. It's not good news. It never is. It's always someone in crisis, someone who just needs to talk, someone who swears that this time everything will change if you're there one more time. And you will. You always will. Not because you want to, but because you learned that abandoning others is a greater sin than abandoning yourself. Machiavelli would call this emotional engineering, an invisible system that trains you to react before you think. The cell phone ring becomes a Pavlovian trigger. Your body already leans, your chest tightens, your mind calculates how to solve a problem that was not created by you. And as you walk into yet another battle that isn't yours, you don't realize that your own life is being pushed to the periphery of history itself. Notice how the dynamics repeat themselves. You help someone pay a bill. The following month, another, larger bill appears. You lend your time to listen. Then your time becomes a daily obligation. You sacrifice a weekend to resolve a drama that doesn't belong to you. Soon, your entire agenda bows to other people's instability. And the most disturbing thing, the more you do, the less recognition you receive. The thank you becomes silence. The order becomes a charge. Addiction settles like mold on the walls of your routine. Machiavelli saw in this the pure logic of psychological power. When someone realizes that you will always be available, your value doesn't increase, it dilutes. Constant rescuing creates an invisible contract in which you exist to keep the other person functioning. And the day you fail, the day you get tired, the day you say not today, affection evaporates and gives way to resentment. As if its function had been broken. Maybe now you remember a specific scene. That time I said I couldn't help. No direct aggression, just the icy silence, the short answer, the sudden change of tone. A subtle but surgical punishment. Machiavelli would smile bitterly. He knew that human beings use the withdrawal of affection as a weapon long before they use violence. And here comes the unexpected twist: you are not chosen because you are strong. You are chosen because you are too accessible. Emotional predators don't look for fragile victims. They look for generous victims. They smell the need to be helpful, the inability to disappoint, the fear of being seen as cold. They don't ask for everything at once. They ask for a little today, another little tomorrow, until their entire life is occupied with maintaining their chaos. Machiavelli described the world as a board on which each piece has value as long as it maintains its position. When a piece starts to move just to support the others, it stops being a piece and becomes a disposable base. You feel this when you realize you no longer have time for your projects, when your health starts to fail, when money disappears without a trace, when your mind starts to work in a permanent state of alert. And yet, you blame yourself for being tired. What you call empathy may just be the refusal to face one's own loneliness. Because when you're not saving anyone, there's silence. That leaves the story itself that you've been putting off for years. There remains the question that you avoid: who would I be if I weren't the rescuer on duty? Machiavelli would not respond with soft phrases. He would just make it clear that the human mind respects those who preserve themselves and exploit those who offer themselves in excess. And as long as you continue to believe that being drained is a sign of virtue, you will continue to attract those who live by sucking away the most precious things you have. But there is something even more unsettling. Not all exhaustion comes from others. Part of it comes from the illusion that you control other people's destiny. That your presence is the difference between fall and salvation. This fantasy is seductive because it makes you feel indispensable. However, deep down, it only masks the fear of accepting that each person carries their own cross. In the next part, Machiavelli will remove the veil once and for all and present the first face of this engine of destruction. A type of person so common that they may be just a few meters away from you right now. And when you learn to recognize it, you will understand why some tragedies never end, they just change addresses. Machiavelli now pulls back the curtain and reveals the first archetype, not as an abstract concept, but as a presence that you have already felt enter your home, sit at your table and consume the air in the room. He calls this type of person the architect of chaos, not because bad luck follows him, but because he builds his own ruin with the same dedication with which others build a career. There's always a new story, there's always a recent injustice, there's always an invisible enemy that the entire world seems to conspire to protect. You listen, you sympathize, you invest time, money, hope, and for a brief moment everything seems stable, as if the storm has dissipated. But then something breaks again, always at the same invisible point. The job you recommended ends in conflict, the relationship you supported ends in betrayal, the money you lent dissolves in poorly explained emergencies. Machiavelli would say that this is not bad luck, it is a pattern, and a pattern is identity. The architect of chaos lives surrounded by debris because he does not know how to exist outside of collapse. Drama is the oxygen that keeps your narrative alive. Have you ever noticed how these people never describe a situation without an external villain? Have you noticed that every defeat they have has a convenient enemy, never a bad decision? And why do you keep believing that, with enough effort, it will be different this time? Machiavelli saw in these individuals a form of psychic laziness, a profound inability to sustain one's own reality. Instead of learning from the consequences, they outsource them, scattering the rubble on whoever is nearby. And you, trying to be a lighthouse, become a deposit of emotional rubble, carrying pieces of stories that are not yours, feeling a tiredness that you cannot explain. There's an image he liked to use: tying your boat to a leaky ship doesn't make the ship safe, it just condemns its hull to the same fate. No matter how much water you remove with your hands, the leak will remain there, and at some point your arms will fail. When was the last time you realized you were solving a recurring problem with another outfit, another scenario, another excuse? And why, even though you recognize the cycle, do you still feel guilty for thinking about walking away? But the architect of chaos is not alone. Machiavelli goes deeper and reveals the second type, even more treacherous because it hides under the mask of necessity, the bottomless pit. This person doesn't implode their own life in big explosions, but eats away at you slowly, drop by drop, until there's nothing left to offer. In the beginning there is exaggerated gratitude, promises of change, teary eyes that make you feel indispensable. It is convincing theater, rehearsed since childhood. Then the tone changes. Requests arrive without ceremony, messages without greeting, expectations without warning. You help once and feel proud. Help two and feel obligated. In the third, you feel afraid to say no. Machiavelli knew that dependence is not born from weakness, it is born from habit. Have you ever noticed how some people don't ask for help, they just let you know they're going to need it? Have you ever felt that discomfort when delaying a response, as if you were failing in a sacred mission? The bottomless pit is not satisfied because it does not seek resources, it seeks identity. He doesn't want a solution, he wants a constant provider of emotional stability. And the perverse thing is that the more you give away, the more invisible you become. Gratitude dissolves, recognition disappears, and in its place comes a heavy silence that communicates something terrible: you are now just part of the picture. Machiavelli would warn that human beings do not respect what they can consume without effort. And here comes the turning point that few realize. These people don't despise you despite your generosity, they despise you because of it. Your strength exposes their weakness, and the mind reacts with resentment. Have you ever been criticized by someone you supported emotionally for years? Have you ever wondered why those you help the most are the first to walk away when you need them? Between the architect of chaos and the bottomless pit there is an invisible link. Both live by externalizing responsibilities. One turns the world into a villain, the other turns you into an obligation. And while you oscillate between pity and guilt, Machiavelli just watches the cold mathematics repeat itself. Your time is running out. Your energy disperses. Your projects become eternal drafts. Maybe now you feel a pang of recognition, a mixture of relief and pain at the realization that you weren't crazy, just trapped in a game you didn't choose to play. But this is still just the beginning. There are types who don't just drain you through incompetence or neediness, but through something darker, something that feeds on their rise. And the question that remains is, how many achievements have you postponed trying to fix stories that weren't yours? Machiavelli now moves to the quietest area of the labyrinth, where the attacks do not come in the form of chaos or lack, but of subtle smiles and apparently protective phrases. He describes the third type as the smiling saboteur, the one who walks alongside you while secretly wishing you would stumble. He is not the declared enemy. He is the historical ally, the colleague who started at the same point, the friend who saw his first steps. When you grow up, something breaks inside you. The rise of others creates a mirror that is impossible to face. So he learns to speak the language of worry, which is the most efficient dialect of envy. You announce an achievement, and he responds with failure statistics. He says he abandoned an old project, and he mentions an acquaintance who went bankrupt. Nothing is frontal, everything is wrapped with care. Machiavelli observed this in the Italian courts, where generals collapsed not for lack of talent, but for poorly deposited confidences. There are historical records of advisors who overthrew rulers just by changing the tone of a sentence before an important decision. One more word, one doubt thrown into the right ear, and an empire changed course. Today, the mechanism is the same, only applied to ordinary lives. The saboteur doesn't want your place, he wants you to come back to him. He prefers a world where no one shines, because in that world no one confronts him with his own failure. When Machiavelli talks about strategic silence, it is not about hiding out of fear, but about understanding that information is ammunition. Every plan revealed, every enthusiasm shared, can turn into leverage against you. But he doesn't stop there. Go one step further and present the fourth type, the most theatrical, the most difficult to abandon, the professional victim. This person doesn't invade your life in flames. They present themselves in tears. You don't find it at parties. You find it in hospitals, crises, painful childhood stories. She collects diagnoses, tragic memories, accumulated injustices. Recent data shows that individuals who strongly identify as chronic victims tend to report less real progress over the years, despite receiving more social support. Pain becomes identity, and identity becomes a shield. Machiavelli would have said that pity is a powerful currency, as it disarms reasoning and commands emotion. You offer a simple solution, and she responds with an emotional barrage. You suggest a small step, and it magnifies the weight of the world. You realize, too late, that you're not helping someone out of a hole, you're financing the hole's maintenance. There are clinical reports of people abandoning effective therapies just as they began to improve, because their improvement threatened the only source of care they knew. This is where the turning point happens. When you finally get tired, when your energy runs out, the victim doesn't thank you, he blames you. You become the antagonist of the story she wrote. Machiavelli understood that every theater needs villains, and you, trying to be a hero, just signed up for the wrong role. This is the phase in which many awaken painfully. The saboteur smiles less, the victim cries louder, and you find yourself surrounded by people who don't want your evolution, just your functional presence. And as you try to sort through the emotional wreckage, the question arises that echoes like a crack in the dark: how many times have you confused closeness with loyalty, fragility with sincerity, concern with real protection? Machiavelli does not romanticize rupture. He simply states that when you remain in environments where your strength is uncomfortable and your compassion is exploited, you are training your own irrelevance. The human mind doesn't play fair, it plays to win. And winning often means keeping you small, too busy saving to grow. And this is where the discomfort sets in once and for all. Because you start to realize that it's not just bad people around you, but invisible patterns that repeat themselves with new faces. When the saboteur walks away, the victim emerges. When the victim falls, the crooked smile returns. And if you don't learn to read the game, the board will rebuild itself. In the next part, Machiavelli will present two types who do not ask for help or hide behind pain, but challenge your intelligence and your sense of reality. They are the ones who test your mental limits, and it is in them that many lose not only time, but their own sanity. Machiavelli now changes the focus. He stops talking about emotions and starts talking about something even more dangerous, the deliberate refusal to learn. He observes the fifth type with a mixture of impatience and irony, like someone who has seen empires fall not because of external attacks, but because of leaders who fell too much in love with their own opinions. The arrogant fool does not recognize himself in mirrors. He builds his identity on rigid certainties, and the more reality contradicts them, the more he clings to them. Have you ever tried to warn someone about a clearly bad business and heard in response that you don't understand anything about the market? He has already shown data, evidence, past experiences, only to be accused of negativity. Machiavelli would say that there is no ignorance there is ego defense. The curious thing is that this guy doesn't usually ask for help. He demands an audience. He doesn't seek guidance, he seeks validation. And when you position yourself as someone who sees the precipice before the fall, you don't become an ally, you become a threat. The tension starts at that point. The conversation that should be simple turns into a duel. The tone rises, the words become harsh, and you realize that you're not discussing ideas. You're touching sacred territory, the image he has of himself. There is a little talked about fact in behavioral psychology that Machiavelli would certainly appreciate people with high cognitive rigidity tend to double down after a wrong decision, not back down. This explains why the arrogant fool sinks deeper and deeper when something goes wrong. He doesn't review, he redoubles. Lose money and invest more. Destroy one relationship and move on to another like it. It's a suicidal escalation pattern. You find yourself stuck in the cycle when you try for the 10th time to explain the obvious. When he rehearses softer phrases, he changes his tone, chooses better words, but nothing breaks through the shield of blind conviction. And the cruelest thing, the more you try to help, the more he treats you like an enemy. Machiavelli had already written that no one hates the truth more than the one who built his life on the lie he tells himself. And then, when everything falls apart, comes the bitter twist. You hope that he will finally recognize the error, that he will thank you for your warning. But what he receives is a new narrative where the blame never rests on him. The economy, others, you, anything will do. Learning doesn't happen. The fall does not generate wisdom, only resentment. It is here that Machiavelli points to the next type, the sixth, with heavy silence. For if the arrogant fool destroys himself, the latter destroys you with repeated intention. The scorpion, the repeater of betrayals, the one who does not make mistakes by chance, but out of habit. You recognize this type by their track record, not their promises. He asks for forgiveness with tears in his eyes, swears that he has changed, presents plans, shows new routines, and for a brief moment he seems different. You remember a forgotten birthday, a money that never got back, a lie that almost ended everything, but you still believe it. Because you want to believe. Machiavelli didn't believe it. He observed patterns like someone observing laws of nature. A falling body always falls downwards. A traitor always returns to his own axis. Modern studies confirm this by showing that repeated disloyalty behaviors have a high rate of recurrence, even after profound interventions. The mind is organized by trails, and the more a trail is followed, the more automatic it becomes. The tension reaches its peak when you realize that each new forgiveness doesn't bring you closer to change, but to the next stab. You begin to live in a state of alert, reading messages with a tight stomach, being suspicious of silences, interpreting gestures. Your life becomes a permanent interrogation room. Machiavelli would call this voluntary slavery. The final twist is brutal. When you finally decide to cut, you don't get understanding, you get fury. Scorpio feels betrayed by losing access to their emotional body. He spreads versions, distorts facts, puts himself as a victim, and you realize that you weren't in a relationship, you were in a training cycle for abuse. And it's at this point that you understand something that changes everything. There are not 6 types of people. There are 6 different ways to take power away from you. And every time you tried to save, you were just feeding a gear that wasn't meant to stop. The next part will not talk about types, but about you, about the moment when everything becomes silent and only your own consciousness remains. Machiavelli now no longer speaks as a palace strategist, but as a silent mirror in front of his own history. After traversing the 6 faces of destruction, you may find yourself feeling a strange emptiness, as if someone has turned off a background noise that has always been there. It's not immediate relief, it's disorientation. Because when the saves are gone, you're left with the question you've avoided for years: who are you when you're not stepping up to support others? He never advocated the hardening of the heart, but the sovereignty of the conscience. The turning point is not to become cold, it is to become clear. Clarity is learning to observe behavior before listening to promises, to measure patterns instead of words, to accept that character is a living statistic. When someone repeatedly reveals that they do not change, lucidity is not cruelty, it is protection. The first practical step starts here. Take a silent inventory of your life. Mentally list who drains your energy, who grows when you walk away, who only appears when needed. Don't judge, just observe. This map is the real territory you step on every day. The second step is more difficult, because it requires internal action before external action. You don't cut people, you cut permissions. Permission to call you at any time, to demand immediate answers, to invade your emotional limits. Every no you rehearse is a psychological muscle being strengthened. Start small. A request that you would always grant without thinking, refuse politely. Observe the reaction. Respect indicates health. Anger or blackmail indicate danger. This simple experiment reveals more about someone than years of living together. The third step is rebuilding your own routine. When you stop saving the unsalvageable, you create empty spaces that are scary. This space needs to be filled by you, not by new crises. Reinvest in postponed projects, in conversations that don't revolve around problems, in silence. Silence is where Machiavelli would find true strength, because it is in silence that the mind stops reacting and starts to choose. You may feel guilty, as if you are betraying old versions of yourself. But it is not treason to abandon your own mutilation. It's maturity. You were not made to carry adults who refuse to grow up. It was made to build something that survives time, not dramas. Now comes the deeper part. Look within and accept that, on some level, you chose these roles because they gave you identity. Being necessary numbs the fear of just being you. But just being you is exactly where freedom lives. When no one else needs your ruin to continue standing, your mind begins to reorganize itself. Anxiety decreases, the body relaxes, creativity returns. You stop living in emergency mode and start existing in construction mode. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, few know what you are. From now on, let the world see only tranquility. Keep your transformation in silence. Don't explain, don't argue, don't negotiate your clarity. Whoever wants to follow, will follow. Whoever needs you to survive will be left behind. This is not a loud victory. It is an internal adjustment that changes everything on the outside. If this video sparked something in you, even if it was secret, even if you didn't want to expose yourself, write in the comments, even anonymously, which type of person drained you the most. Your experience could be the key to freeing someone who has been watching in silence. Like this video so it reaches more people stuck in the same cycles, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of clarity and personal sovereignty. You didn't get here by chance.